followers of Neuro Takeaway, welcome back to the channel. Today we are focusing on dementias. To start, I would like to imagine a very frequent clinical situation in which a neurologist has to tell a patient or a patient's family that she or he suffers from Alzheimer's disease. What's the accuracy of this statement? To answer this question, we have to focus on these two studies that were published in 2014 in the New England Journal of Medicine. They both try to prove the utility of two monoclonal antibodies against beta amyloid, which, as you know, is one of the most proposed mechanisms of the disease. And the results were not encouraging, but I would like to look at other aspects of these trials. The inclusion criteria that they used were the 2011 guidelines of the National Institute of Aging and Alzheimer's Association, which were both based mainly on clinical grounds. After the studies, most of the patients underwent PET amyloid, and surprisingly, up to 30% of cases were normal. So the inaccuracy of the diagnosis was too high. So to improve ourselves in doing the diagnosis, we have to better understand the complexity of this issue. Okay, fortunately today in 2021, we have several biomarkers, both on imaging and on liquid testing, that can help us determine whether or not a patient has one of these variables: amyloid, tau, neurodegeneration, and as usual with the clinical examination and neuropsychological testing, we can assess the cognitive decline. So each of these variables, each of these spheres can be isolated or combined in different ways among themselves. So the picture is quite complex. But there are some concepts that most of the authors agree on. One is that to determine the presence of Alzheimer's disease, we have to find both tau and amyloid. There is no need for neurodegeneration or for cognitive decline, and that's a paradigm shift to a biological definition of the disease. So a person can be completely asymptomatic and suffers from Alzheimer's disease. On the other hand, when a patient has amyloid but no tau or neurodegeneration, that's called Alzheimer's pathological changes, and can be the first stage of a continuum, or can be an association with other processes. Okay, in 2018, a group of experts from the National Institute of Aging and the Alzheimer's Association published a seminal letter trying to shed light on this complex issue. By the way, this paper was led by a radiologist, Professor Clifford Jack from the Mayo Clinic. They grouped these biomarkers into three categories. A, for amyloid, and that can be determined by the use of amyloid PET or by the testing of amyloid 42 in the CSF, which is low. T for tau, we can use there the tau PET using fluorotaucipir as ligand, or by the testing of phosphorylated tau in the CSF, which is high. And the third group is the neurodegeneration. This N is between brackets because it is the most unspecific finding. It can be produced by several processes, as you know. So to establish a neurodegeneration, we have MRI. We can assess atrophy with MRI, or we can use FDG PET or the content of total tau in the CSF. So combining these three groups, we can have 8 profiles, and we can divide them into 2 categories. One is the Alzheimer's continuum, which, as we said before, this group has to have amyloid as a sine qua non condition. And then the group without amyloid, which is called the non-Alzheimer pathological changes. So as you can see, now we are going with this paper, with this classification, to a biological definition of Alzheimer's disease, and this is a paradigm shift. Okay, now we are going to see how it works in real life. These are patients from the Mayo Clinic. We have on the right side, on the left side, a 75-year-old man with an amnestic multi-domain cognitive decline, and we can see the images below. We have the amyloid PET and the first image, and then 2 images of the tau PET, and then the MRI. By convention, on PET, the hot areas, the positive areas, are red, and the negative areas are black or blue, and the intermediate areas are green and yellow. So here we have positive areas for amyloid and for PET and for tau. And the MRI shows clearly a profound atrophy of the cortex that can be assessed both visually by different scales, as the Shelton's scale for the temporal lobes, or by different softwares. So this patient clearly has an Alzheimer's, a clinical Alzheimer's disease. On the right side, we have a 67-year-old man with which is cognitively normal, and we can see the images. You can see the first row is the amyloid PET, which is positive. Then in the second row, the tau PET negative, and the MRI is normal. So this patient has what we can call a preclinical stage of Alzheimer's disease with pathological changes. Well, the good thing of using this new approach is that we can discover new scenarios. For instance, on the right side, on the left side, you have an 86-year-old woman with dementia. She has a negative amyloid scan, negative tau scan, and the MRI is very pathologic. You can see a profound atrophy of the temporal lobes and the neocortex, which is compatible with the hippocampal sclerosis. So this scenario is probably what we talked about in the last video, a case of late. On the right side, we have a 91-year-old man with dementia. The scan for PET is very positive. We have aggregates all over the cortex. The tau PET is negative, and the MRI is very abnormal. There is a lot of atrophy with hippocampal sclerosis. And so this is probably a case of comorbidity. He has both Alzheimer's changes and another disease, probably late. And this scenario with comorbidity is one of the most frequent in real life. Well, what are the future perspectives? Even though this graph is a little bit exaggerated, the United Nations predicts that by 2050 there will be around 1.5 billion people aged 65 years or older. That will be 1 in 6. And many of them will suffer from some form of cognitive decline, from mild cognitive impairment to a frank dementia. And the etiology in most cases will be multiple. Comorbidity will be the rule, not just from neurodegenerative diseases, but from vascular diseases and other etiologies. So we'll have to be ready for that. There are at least 2 pending issues. One is the necessity of more accessible and affordable biomarkers. For example, it would be fantastic to have the possibility of detecting amyloid and tau in serum. And on the other hand, we need obviously and urgently an effective treatment. If we find a new treatment and a good treatment, that will bring another problem, which is the necessity to detect the population at risk, and that it is an economical challenge. So with this, I'm gonna conclude this talk, and if you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel. See you next time. Bye bye.